and welcome to Edison TV. I'm Miłosz Papst, Director of Investment Trust Content at Edison, and today I'm joined by Craig Martin, who's Executive Chairman of Dynam Capital, the investment manager of Vietnam Holding. Craig, many thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Maybe you can start by discussing your current view on the corporate earnings outlook in Vietnam, what you've seen so far this year and what do you expect for the rest of the year?
Well, look, it's been a good year so far for Vietnam. It's been a great year so far for Vietnam Holding. As we entered the year, the market was looking for around about a 20% earnings per share growth, most broadly said, and our portfolio is already up about 17%, and the market's probably up about 10% where we're at today. So there's still plenty to come, and it's been a strong start to the year. But it's a mixed story across sectors. So you have to be careful, you've got to be nimble, you've got to be very focused. So we're looking for both for this year and next year, good overall earnings growth around about the 20% level. And for us, we're really trying to find kind of compounders, businesses that can kind of compound their earnings year in, year out. And we've certainly seen that with some of the top companies in our portfolio. FPT, our number one holding, it's our largest position, around about 15% of net asset value. And it's been compounding its earnings by 20 to 30% per year over a last decade. And it's probably delivered for us a 10 times kind of cash on cash return. So a real compounder. We're also seeing retail demand in the market in terms of the retail sector start to pick up. And that's on renewed domestic spending activity. That's both domestic tourism driven as well as domestic consumption more broadly, as well as international tourism picking up. But I should caution, Vietnam is a market that has volatility. It's often driven by the domestic sentiment. The domestic retail investor base is very important, and it's how the market will react in the second half of the year, to what's happening on the global market, whether interest rates eventually in the US come down or if they stay higher for longer. And that might have an impact on the currency. And also Vietnam's a very open economy. So changes in trade behavior is something to keep a close look on. But we're positive for the second half of the year, and we think it's been a great year so far.
Excellent, thank you. And Vietnam Holding has outperformed the broad equities market in Vietnam in the long and short term. So maybe you can tell us how you are positioning your portfolio to maintain this performance going forward. Obviously, you've touched upon positioning a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate further on that.
Well, yes, as you said, year to date, the fund's up around about 17%. The market, the Vietnam All Share Index, around about 10%. And if you look back over, say, a 12-month period year to date, we're up close to 30% against 15% for the index. And a slightly longer lens, you look back over, say, last 5 years, and our annualized return is about 14%. The market's about 7%. So there's strong kind of consistent outperformance there. And so how do we achieve that? Well, by doing simple things well, hopefully we continue to do that. We're quite nimble. We think we're right-sized for the market. We're very focused on the portfolio. And we're a concentrated portfolio. Our top 10 holdings account for about 64% of the portfolio. And also high conviction. So there are about 24 names, 24 companies in the portfolio today, 24 portfolio companies. In the Vietnam market, there's about 1,600 public companies to choose from. So you've got to be a little bit selective. And we've filtered that down to a smart universe of 50 to 80 companies that we know very well. So we have these 24 companies in the portfolio. We've got maybe another 25 waiting in the wings. And it's a quality problem. And we like the problem, which is, we have to sell something in order to bring something into the portfolio. And we're looking at, the risk-adjusted returns and prospects for these kind of 20 to 50 companies that we keep a close eye on. Many names we hold for a long term. Some we exit, and then in a couple of years' time, we maybe bring them back into the portfolio if there's new catalysts for their further continued growth. So we're nimble. We meet as a team and an investment committee very regularly. We're looking at the changes in the market. So being nimble, being super focused, and having a high conviction, and really kind of getting underneath what these companies are trying to achieve in the long term, in the 3 to 5 year kind of period of time. So not doing anything particularly clever, just kind of consistent, and trying to find compounders, these businesses that we can find that can compound their earnings at 20 to 30% per annum over a medium length of time. And so far, it's worked really well. And we've just got a few themes: industrialization, the domestic consumer, and urbanization. And they're the themes we've had for the last 5, 6 years, and we see those playing out. But at times, you have to kind of adjust your positioning within those themes. And as I said at the beginning, the market's got a good growth in it, but it's not a level playing field across all companies and all sectors. You have to be focused, and then you have to do your research very carefully.
Perfect, thank you. That's very helpful. Now, Vietnam Holding has also recently introduced a share redemption facility. So maybe you can tell our listeners how does it work and why is it attractive for shareholders?
Well, look, this is a very innovative feature for closed-end funds, and particularly unique amongst the London-listed funds focused on Vietnam. I should say the board of the fund has been very active over the last 5 years in things like buybacks and tender offers. And then at the end of last year, the shareholders approved this annual redemption facility. So once a year, in addition to, of course, being able to sell their shares on a daily basis on the stock market, on the London Stock Exchange, once a year, shareholders can tender some of their shares at net asset value. So it's really good for long-term investors, people that have held the shares for more than 2 years. They can redeem without any redemption fees whatsoever. If they've held, less than a year, but say more than 6 months, there's a charge of 3%, and then between 1 year and 2 years, there is a redemption charge of about 2%. Those fees are paid to the fund, so they benefit remaining shareholders. What we've seen, as I say, is an innovative feature, and I think it gives confidence to shareholders that their interests are being well served by the board and by the company. And as a result of when this was passed by shareholders at the end of last year, we saw the discount, the share price to net asset value discount, narrow to about 5%. Now, the other funds in a similar space are around about 20% discount. So I think we're pleased that shareholders have viewed this very positively. And in fact, it's a kind of record low discount for Vietnam Holding. So I think that's positive news. And that's also contributed to the share price increase in the fund, which we've seen this year particularly. So all good news. And the first year for redemption is this year, is 2024, after the summer. So September time, there'll be that first redemption opportunity for shareholders.
Great, thank you. And I also saw that Vietnam Holding and Dynam Capital were the title sponsors of a recent ESG conference in Vietnam. And I think you moderated a panel on Vietnam supply chain. So why is this relevant for Vietnam Holding?
Well, look, ESG has been a key part of our investment process for many, many years. And Vietnam Holding was the earliest adopter of the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing back in 2009. That was just 3 years after the principles were first established. And ESG actually fits now very closely with our investment themes. One of our key investment themes is industrialization, and that's the role that Vietnam has to play in the global supply chain. This is the Made in Vietnam story. And obviously, also Vietnam's getting a lot of attraction from China and other manufacturers who are looking to move some of their manufacturing from China and other parts of the world to Vietnam. Vietnam's been a very open trading nation, and increasingly ESG commitments, the kind of best practice, traceability, are being embedded in some of the trade deals on a G2G, a government-to-government, country-to-country basis. So, for example, with the EU, that was one of the more recent trade deals a few years back now. And so the challenge for Vietnam is how to accommodate those policies and operate within those guidelines and requirements. And it means companies must do more, they must measure more and report more. And that's consistent with a mantra that we've been saying at Vietnam Holding for many years. In fact, one of the panelists on the panel that I moderated during the conference was FPT. That's our #1 company. And their role as a digital champion is also an important one. They're helping companies digitalize, and that's important if you want to measure and report as a business on things such as your carbon footprint, on how you're looking to transition your business to net zero by 2050, which is the government's aim within Vietnam. So we sponsored the conference. as a means to kind of act as a catalyst to get corporates and investors aligned around these objectives. And it was a successful conference. It's the second year that we've sponsored it. But I say ESG is not new to Vietnam Holding. It's something we've been looking at for a long-term basis, and we see it's accretive to our returns. So we have a strong focus on ESG, and yet we're also a top performer in terms of our net asset value growth and also our share price performance.
Perfect, thank you. And finally, with the changes among top political positions in Vietnam, do we expect any changes in the government's approach to fostering, Vietnam's economic growth?
Well, political change seems to be the flavor of the month globally, doesn't it? This year, 50 countries, 60% of them all going to the polls, and EU, there's a lot of elections happening. Political change in Vietnam is slightly different. Political change and the political system tends to be more of a consensus basis among the key positions and the Politburo in Vietnam. We expect that to continue, but we do expect to see changes in the roles from time to time that people are playing in those politics. And certainly we've seen quite a lot of change in the last few months. Part of that is in the context of this big push against corruption and improving the kind of way that the capital markets will perform, the bond market in particular. There's a lot of moves against people who are acting fast and loose in the bond market. And generally, there's been a big push against corruption. So the positive thing is that all parts of the government, and particularly the Prime Minister and the political leaders, have very simple objectives for Vietnam. Those objectives is to see the wealth of its people, its 100 million people, increase. It's to see Vietnam become a more modern, industrialized economy. And it's also to see Vietnam further become entrenched as this global supply center. And so they're great aims, they're noble aims, and particularly to do that in a carbon neutral way by 2050, to be net zero by 2050. That's quite a challenge. But all of those objectives that the government has, despite the political changes, sit well with foreign investors. So although there can be political change and that can cause delays to project implementations and things like that, it's also pleasing to see that the rate of public investment is accelerating. So there's a lot of a push for removing some of the red tape and getting an increased level of public investment in infrastructure. And we see that as having a multiplier effect. And that's going to be very positive for economic growth in the midterm, the next 3 to 5 years in Vietnam.
Rick Martin, Executive Chairman of Dynam Capital. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.